Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be commencing. Welcome to today's Values and Ethics Subcommittee of the Audit Committee meeting. Today is Monday, the 25th of September 2023. I don't believe we're expecting any fire alarms or reasons to be taken. Fire, in case the alarm does go off, the procedure is that we assemble, imagine some by the cathedral, just outside the building. Straight into the agenda then. Introductions. So I am Abibola Adebayo, Chair of the Values and Ethics Committee. We'll go around the room and allow everyone to introduce themselves, just for those who are familiar with everyone else.
Tim McGarrett, Director of Capital Services.
Nancy Rollison, Head of Green Services.
Tim Kent, Councillor Henry from Whitchurch Park, and I'm a substitute today.
Simon, Chief Engineer.
Jonathan Hacker, Councillor for Suffolk.
Tony Dyer, Councillor for South Ward.
Alison Taylor, part of the subcommittee.
That's me. So yeah, councillors have been on the board. Who's on like not 100%. So we'll go away just in
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, everyone else. I believe this is everyone on the standing.
Yes, Chair, just to point out that Councillor Kent said he's substituting for Councillor Brown today.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor. Next, moving on quickly, declarations of interest. Any declarations by the university members? No, thank you. Next is minutes of previous meeting. So for this meeting, I was absent from the meeting. I was unavailable. Councillor Dyer, did you check the meeting?
I did. I'm okay in minutes. I don't know. Councillor Goodman or something.
Yeah, afterwards, I think we spoke to him about the line about consulting. It said with the party group leaders and whips before bringing back the report. And I said I'd assume that you'd also be involving us as members of the Values and Ethics Committee to discuss it before it was brought back. And he said yes, that was the case. But it might be that it was reflected differently in the minutes.
Yeah, my recollection was that there wasn't the appetite for the report that was presented last time, and I got the impression that it was probably best left until a future administration was in place in 2024, and my preference would probably be to leave it until then, and that seemed to be the sort of direction we're travelling, and hopefully that's okay with the committee.
And I guess as long as the party group leaders and whips informed those of us in the Value and Ethics Subcommittee that it's, or whoever it is at the time, that this is coming back up, and we need to be aware of it, it might need to be a problem, because it felt like, obviously a bigger thing than just was.
Yes.
So we're discussing each party.
If that's okay with the committee, I'll
Yes.
I'll put that on the pending list until after May next year.
Thank you.
So I think is there any action being taken?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay. Any other comments regarding those minutes? So we'll take them as fine. Thank you. So moving again swiftly to the next item, public forum. Correct me if I'm wrong, the pattern is that we'll deal with statements and questions ahead of each agenda item. Okay.
Just so happens that all the items are 4 items.
Okay. Good then. So I appreciate there have been a number of questions and statements received for this item 6, which is summary of complaints against councillors and revised complaints proceeding. I have consulted with the monitoring officer and the head of legal services, again, looking at the high number of questions that were raised regarding that item, and I've agreed with them that responses will be provided in writing for all the questions that are raised. Hopefully, they are able to come back to the committee or to the individuals who've raised those questions quickly within the next week or two, did you say? By the end of this week. So what will then happen is at the same time those responses are being provided to those individuals, responses will be provided to the committee as well. So what we will then do, and again, open to the views of my colleagues within the committee, is that we will then consider, hopefully those questions those responses satisfy. But if they do not, we will then consider any supplementary questions as well as any further commentary at the next values and ethics meeting, which we will be looking to have hopefully within the next month, sometime in October. Again, just due to the volume of the questions that have been raised, and so that we can give it the attention it deserves. So hopefully...
Sorry, Chair, I need to interrupt. Which rule are you relying on to skip the public forum questions? Because I've been reading the Constitution, and it says quite clearly that questions by members of the public may be asked of the Chair, questions will be asked in order that they're received, and questions may only be asked if clear working notice has been given. And my understanding is that everyone here asks questions in a timely manner. I understand there's a lot of questions to be answered, but the questions are meant to inform the debate that this committee has. And it doesn't seem obvious to me that it's the debate about the agenda items can actually go forward in an informed and legal manner without the questions being answered and the members of the public having the chance to ask supplementary questions before the agenda items are reached.
Yes, and that was what I was trying to explain before I hand over to the head of legal services or the monitoring officer in case they have any other comments. Because there was such a high volume of questions, we want to give it the attention it deserves.
That's great.
Yes.
That's great. Which rule in the Bristol City Council Constitution are you relying on to skip public forum question?
So, if I can just clarify, the questions can be asked of the chair or the executive member, but all of the questions, apart from one in fact, was actually asked of either the monitoring officer or myself as the head of legal service. So the chair has referred those questions to the monitoring officer and myself to respond to.
So that's not accurate. My questions were explicitly to the committee, or some of them were.
Well, so it was...
Which rule are you relying on to avoid public forum questions?
Yeah. So would you give her a moment to respond as best as she can, and then we will then proceed with the meeting. Nancy, please finish. And then...
The questions are not questions that the chair would have been able to answer because they're directed to the monitoring officer ultimately. So I think or to the head of legal services. It's not a question that the committee are refusing to answer the questions. It's simply that in order to be able to properly answer all of the questions that have been put, that written responses are given. I was going to say to the chair that one of the people who submitted questions, I don't think it's present today, has said yes, they understand why that decision's been taken, but would it be possible for, once written responses have been received, for written supplementary questions to be put, and I advise the chair that that is in his discretion to say whether that's appropriate or not. And I think the chair is minded to agree that once you have received written responses to your questions, you can then submit written supplementary questions which
Okay, that doesn't answer my question. And I'm going to quote from my question. Number one, my question is, does this committee agree that the process could be improved by adding those pieces of information to the summary of complaints report? That's clearly a question for the committee, not for the monitoring officer. And I ask again, what rule are you relying on to delay the public forum questions? Because there needs to be a rule that you invoke. It doesn't appear to be legal to just say you're not taking public forum questions.
No, we haven't said that. Let's stop.
Chair, may I answer the question?
Yeah.
Because there is a committee rule that you can rely on here,
Okay.
which is in committee procedure rule 10. It's motions without notice. The following motions may be moved without notice. And subletter M is to suspend a particular committee procedure rule, and that would enable you to suspend the rules relating to questions in committee procedure rule 9 and to deal with the matter in the way that you've outlined. And I suggest that a motion is formally put to the meeting in that regard to ensure that we are complying with our own internal rules.
So hopefully that helps.
No, sorry. So you're putting that motion to the committee, so it needs to be voted on?
Any views from the other councillors? Yes, can we put that motion to Councillor Day?
Chair, I have to be honest, I'm not comfortable with us proceeding with agenda item number 6 if we had the opportunity to hear the responses to the questions.
Thank you.
I'm aware that we have a meeting scheduled for the beginning of October.
Yeah.
My preference would be that we defer agenda item number 6 until that meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Dan?
If I just back what Tony just said there.
Yeah.
It's not good that the public can come along and they can ask their questions. I understand
Yes.
the volume of questions were overloading. It would have been good if we could have attempted to answer some of those questions.
Okay.
But given the scenario we face, I think probably putting that report to the XBC plus all the public business, including those questions, to that meeting will probably be the fairest way to proceed. It's not a great way to proceed because the public are here to address us. And I think perhaps if members of the public are here, we should still give them a few minutes to address us if they wish.
Okay.
But because people are taking their time to come to us.
Yeah.
But I think that would be the fairest way to proceed. I think Tim's interpretation of the Constitution was perfectly legal, but probably not good politics,
Yeah.
I would say. It's good to use a clause. I would rather actually we adjourn all of that agenda item plus the public business to the next meeting.
Thank you. And I totally agree with you, councillors, but let's hear what everyone has.
So I think, Councillor Dye's proposal is a really good one. I was going to say similar to Tim, it would be good with the members of the public who have made the effort to come here and they might not be able to come to the next meeting. It's right that we consider the items properly at the next meeting, but I'd like them to get the opportunity to speak now with them, to at least speak to their question in a time scale allotted in case they are not able to come at the next time. It might be a little bit out of the norm, but it feels right to give them that opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, on this one.
Completely agree with the comments that have been made.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, councillors, for all your comments. I think at the beginning of the meeting, before the gentleman raised his question, I was trying to separate the meeting into two parts. So address the matter regarding questions that have been submitted, which we require more time to provide response to, and then maybe allow people present to speak to their statements, for those who have made statements, and then maybe take any other extra questions. So hopefully that satisfies in that.
Yeah, I don't have a statement. My personal preference would be to have the written answers at the next meeting so that I can see the details and then have the supplementary without taking up the committee's time today.
Thank you. Thank you.
But Chair, can I just point out there is some public business about agenda item 7.
Yeah.
So there's 2 questions there. And agenda item 7, member of conduct.
So we're on agenda item 6, I believe.
Yes, there are questions, not just for item 6, there are questions on 7 as well.
Okay, and those will be provided as part of your response, wouldn't it? Yes. But we're still on agenda item 6. I think let's...
Charles, I think the point that Nancy and Tim are making is that we are in a similar situation with agenda item 7 as we are with agenda item 6. Where questions to be asked and members of the public have not been provided with written responses.
Yeah.
I understand the difficulties and there were a lot of questions coming in, but we do have to be seen to be we are elected on behalf of the members of the public, and part of that is in order to respond. And all through monitoring officer is completely correct in the technicalities. We also there's also a perception of us being seen to be fair. We have set a limit for when questions have to be in by. As far as I understand, there are no limits on the number of questions that can be answered by any one individual, unlike some other committees. And as far as I'm aware, all the questions were submitted in time. So I don't think if I'm completely bluntly and honest about this, I don't think we can proceed with any of the agenda items on this meeting because both 6 and 7 are affected by the questions.
Okay.
Agenda item number 8 we may be able to proceed with. But it may well be that those 6 and 7 will have to be referred to the next meeting.
Altogether, questions and statements is what you're suggesting.
Yes, I think members of the public being asked to make statements or ask questions to items that we're not then going to review is probably unfair on the members of the public. And I appreciate that they have made the time and the effort to attend this meeting. I think they made the time and effort to attend this meeting on the understanding that they were going to get responses to their questions today.
Okay.
Sorry, could I just say something? Whenever we've submitted, I'm by no means an expert in any of your committee meetings, but when I've submitted questions to full council, we're told that there may not be time for all of the questions, and they will be taken in the order in which they're received. So it seems very a different scenario here, that because of the volume, the total volume of questions, you decided to take none. And that seems very different to what we do at full council. I don't really understand why we can't have some questions, because I'm sure, as members of the public, we're submitting questions. When we do submit questions, we don't know how many they're going to be. And we know when we've come to full council before, we may or may not get a chance to ask our questions. It seems really odd for all of us to have come here today and no questions at all to be allowed. You have time for public questions, so to say carte blanche, none of them are going to be allowed, seems really odd.
So if it's fine with my colleagues on the committee, this is the approach I'm going to suggest. And I do apologize to everyone who's made the trip here. We try to give some sort of forewarning and notice that the questions, we will not be able to provide responses today. All I can do is apologize. So what we're going to propose is we will, so that we don't, because the thing is, if we're going to defer the items, which I think is the right thing to do, so that we have all the information at the time we have sort of a full, proper conversation on those items, then we can draw a line on the 6 and 7 now. But then again, I'm trying to be as considerate as possible and fair, appreciating who's made the trip here, So we're happy to take, if there are any supplementary questions, so if there's anything that hasn't made it to the original list, if you've already asked a question, we will have to come back to you soon, hopefully at the next meeting, to provide the responses and have this whole conversation. But if there are any other questions, we're happy to take them at this time, bearing in mind we also might not have a ready response. So the monitoring officer and the head of legal services might not have a ready response. There will just be an addition to that list, which we still have to come back to you on at the next meeting. So if that's fine with my colleagues, we'll take that approach, and then we'll defer the items till the next meeting.
Well, what happens at the next meeting when you've got twice as many questions and twice as many statements?
No, we wouldn't. So what I'm saying, the point I made now is we're taking any further questions from those in the room, but we already have that complete list of questions, so we're not going to be adding to that list between now and the next meeting. Or statements.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think people can make their statements to the committee now, because that doesn't require answers.
Yes.
And we'll have to wait, further questions will have to wait to the next meeting, if that makes sense to everybody.
I appreciate you asked the question. Does that satisfy that?
I think
Next
that's
time
what
we'll then say to on everything.
The irony is that we could have asked quite a few questions in the last half an hour.
It's a committee.
So statements, we follow that list, or we'll just open it. So we have a list of, I'm going to call out the list, I'm not sure who's present and who's not, so we'll just go through that list. Bear with me. What page is it? Oh, this. Okay. Clive statements. Take a statement from him.
Could I just make sure, given that what was asked about constitutionally what we're doing,
Yeah.
I think we need a clear proposal about what we're doing, what rule it's under, and how we're going to deal with it. It's just, I'm a little bit confused about what's going to happen now. Are we proposing that we only take statements now, or are we allowing people that have submitted questions to make their statement now, even though those questions won't be answered? And you're deferring rules, and this is what you're proposing.
Okay. So maybe I misspoke before I said questions. I was trying to refer to the statement, so sorry, I'm still not very, So we'll take the statements, and I'll leave it to Tim, the monitoring officer, to clarify what the legal backing is of the rules are. So we'll take any statements from those present in the room, but still the responses to the questions will not happen till the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the questions, the statements can be from people who submitted either questions or statements.
Yes, fine, as long as
it's the opportunity to speak, and that's what we're proposing, relaxation of the rules to allow people to make a statement, whether they've put in a statement or a question.
Through the chair, just to clarify, anybody who's come, even if they haven't submitted a statement because they've come today, the chair's allowing discretion for them to say something.
Okay,
Yes.
right, yeah, brilliant, thank you.
Is
Thank you
that
for that clarification. Yeah, I'm happy to proceed on that.
And you're clear on the rules?
Yeah, so we need to do a formal vote just to say let's go ahead on that basis.
Some of the subcommittee could just...
But when we come to putting the paperwork to the next meeting, we will have to do a formal vote. But on this thing, it's under the chair's discretion.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your understanding. So we'll go to that list now. Thank you. So first on the list is Clive Stevens. He's not there. Jen Smith.
I thought the statement was just dated 20 minutes to be honest. Right, so recently I submitted a complaint against the Mayor's monitoring officer for not allowing an independent investigation into the council's spying on families. This was an investigation democratically voted for at full council a year ago. The complaint has been rejected by the monitoring officer. That rejection came to me through people who presented through a person who presented defamatory statements about me in a report to People's Scrutiny Commission, which I've still not received an apology for. I did ask the monitoring officer to reconsider because I believe it meets current council policy for investigation, but to no avail. My complaint into Marvin Ree's conduct has been blocked, and this obstruction supported by people who are part of the whole sordid affair. I believe it's been blocked because of the toxic culture of no accountability in Bristol cultivated by Rees, and that it's one more process the council can use to bully people it doesn't like and wants to shut down. This is a sham democracy that's made fools of councillors, targets citizens, and makes Bristol look vindictive and ridiculous. Media reports last week suggest that in addition to what we already know, the pervasive stench of underhanded surveillance of Bristol families extends so much further than we realise. We need this investigation. I wonder why the monitoring officer doesn't agree, and that having seen this shambolic attempt at trying to ask questions today, I just think nothing surprises me anymore, to be honest.
Thank you. John and Mrs. John.
Hi, it's me again. I'm absolutely delighted to see that the LDA Code of Conduct is going to be adopted instead of the current member Code of Conduct, which was woefully inadequate. But I would like to make an observation about the list of member complaints as submitted to this Values and Ethics Committee. Due to BCC procedures, the list does not provide the committee with the information they would require to identify whether complaints are being submitted consistently about one particular member. And while I understand the need for privacy, there should be oversight and a record of this aspect of the complaints received. Therefore, some form of scrutiny and consistent record keeping is absolutely required as a key part of the complaints procedure to assess whether there is a pattern of behaviour visible that could constitute a red flag. Without this, consistent complaints about one member, whether upheld or not, could easily be ignored and turned into an acceptable mode of working, putting the public at risk of abuse. Surely this committee can see there is a gap in risk assessment here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Leslie Powell.
Hi there. As per the list submitted to the committee, there have been 13 member code of conduct complaints in the last 10 months between the 17th of October 22 and the 25th of August 23. I understand that 38% of these complaints were about a single member. Of these 13 complaints, 10 were rejected but deemed to require no further action, and the remaining 3 simply identified an apology to the complainant to be provided and/or a reminder of the code of conduct. This infers that the people making these complaints were not heard as well as they might have been if there had been more robust investigation process in place. One serious complaint was dismissed completely for being too similar to a previous complaint which had been received and not upheld. With no appeals process available to complainants, it appears to be a very opaque process with an opportunity for complaints to be dismissed for expediency and convenience, with the knowledge that very little scrutiny is going to take place. It's hard to see how the Values and Ethics Committee can properly oversee, comment and advise on changes or action needed to uphold the values and ethics when they do not have the correct level of information with which to make decisions. Surely there needs to be oversight and scrutiny into the procedures and process itself to ensure a balanced assessment is made that honours and validates the complainant as much as the complaining. This definitely does not appear to be the case at the current time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike Aldridge.
Hello everyone. In July 2022, I made a complaint about a councillor. The next bit of my statement has been redacted at the request of legal services. That request was made at 4:30 on Friday afternoon when I submitted my statement really early on Friday morning before I left for work. Make of that what you will. 5 months later, December 22, the monitoring officer rejected my complaint, accusing me of political motivation. I complained to the LGO, who found that due process had been followed. This was on the 1st of June of this year, but ruled that BCC must, apologised to me for the unreasonable delay, 5 months to just provide a decision, and update its members' complaints policy within 3 months. The monitoring officer and head of legal services have not mentioned the LGO findings in their report to V&E, and they have omitted any details of how long complaints are taken to resolve. This is not ethical behaviour. It is misleading members by omission. Members must ask themselves what else is being withheld. The monitoring officer has also failed to act on LGA best practice recommendations on member complaints and code of conduct, and these were published 3 years ago. The head of legal services dealt with my complaint. It took her over 20 working days to find an independent person to begin the complaints process. The monitoring officer then told me he didn't consider this delay material, despite the fact this exceeds the entire deadline for dealing with any complaint. Communication was non-existent from the head of legal services. She never explained the complaints process to me, nor the role or need to appoint an independent person. All contact was on my part, and I was treated like a problem. When I asked about the delay on the 6th of October, having heard nothing in over a month, the head of legal services said she was struggling to find an independent person, and the person I usually instruct is no longer available. How did this come about, and is it yet another example of poor management of complaint processes by the monitoring officer? Has the council failed in its legal duty to have appointed an independent person? Was the independent person appointed following due process? These are all questions members need to consider. Why did it take so long to decide my complaint? The facts were all based on tweets, and there were screenshots of everything the councillor had said. I believe the monitoring officer and the head of legal services were determined not to investigate my complaint or frustrate it as far as possible. It's interesting to note that the ICO has recently issued a practice recommendation for the disproportionately high number of complaints about response times on freedom of information requests. This is surely no coincidence.
Apologies, Mike, I have to interrupt. You seem to be reading it verbatim.
Yeah.
There's a limit to...
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise. This is my first rodeo, so I'm very sorry about that.
No, it's all right. If you're able to summarise the rest of it, that would be appreciated. Because
I think. Well, I'm concerned about the use of the term politically motivated to bar complaints. Will we get a chance? Members will see this, that they can read this. They've already done it. That's okay. Yeah. And I'm also, the other thing that concerns me is this misuse, as I see it, of confidentiality in the draft complaints policy, because that's actually putting a gag on people. If you look in the media, everything now is saying these NDAs should not be used against victims of abuse, which is essentially what this can be. So I think the council would be acting unethically to impose these conditions, and the LGA makes it clear that it's not actually practical or probably even legal to impose them. And I think yes, I think the councillors just haven't been given the information on the complaints process that they need to assess whether it's being run effectively and efficiently.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. And again, have we were able to take any other statements, one or two, from those in the room, if any more, and then...
I've probably spoken enough, but why not a tiny bit
Are
more?
you able to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Dan Aykroyd.
Okay.
This is not prepared, so it's going to be a bit rough. Currently, Bristol City Council is seeing an extreme politicisation of the planning process, which my understanding is leading to very unpleasant messages being sent to officers and councillors on the planning committee. There's a football club who have been viciously nasty to the neighbours around their stadium, beginning work on a football ground, which has made life hell for the people in that neighbourhood. There's the East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood Scheme is moving forward, and members of the Cabinet have been in my...
Excuse me, I'll have to interrupt. Planning isn't a matter for this committee.
So, let me clarify my point.
Okay.
I believe the behaviour of some councillors has resulted in a politicisation of the planning process. The planning process is meant to be apolitical because people get worked up about plans that are submitted and members of the public sometimes misbehave. Councillor Annie Stafford recently wrote an article saying Bristol Council needs to cool the waters because unpleasant messages are being received by planning officers and people on the planning committee, which sounds like if it's not a code of conduct problem, it probably should be. We have councillors who are feeling free to call people names, including stuff like demented lentil-eating amateurs. This is just not a good situation. The East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood Scheme is quite a controversial scheme. There's been a lot of vandalism and some violence around the country when similar schemes have been introduced, and the level of heat in the discourse around the East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood is running at a very high level. I am very concerned that the heat that's produced when members troll each other to try to get people to back their scheme in public is adding to that heat, and I'm very scared that when the scheme is introduced there's going to be violence in this city as not a direct result but an incidental result of the behaviour that's allowed. And I think we need to get the code of conduct process improved and get members behaving better so that we don't have very bad incidents in the new year.
Thank you. Thank you. Are we, is all? Yeah. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Joanna Booth. I hadn't submitted a statement, so this is hopefully be brief, but I just wanted to add something about the code of conduct and the confidentiality part. So I submitted 2 complaints last year. One was dismissed, about that, and the other one was delayed by 5 months, and then there was an informal resolution which was not adhered to at all. So Sean mentioned that the LGA code of conduct was to be adopted now, and I've seen that there is going to be changes in the way that members conduct themselves. So I wanted to read out something from the model code of conduct that the LGA actually has published, and this is to do with confidentiality. Apart from all the rest, it says, members of the public are not covered by the code of conduct. A person making an allegation about a councillor is under no responsibility to the subject member to keep that complaint confidential. But if they do decide to publish the complaint and it's untrue, then they may be exposed to defamation. But the point is that this is a very valid fact. There is no point of entry for a complainant. There is nothing on the form, there is nothing on the website, and there were nothing in my communications to say that the outcome would be confidential. The confidentiality part protects the accuser, and the lack of actual formal completion of the complaints also protects them. I mean, there's a published list of complaints on the agenda in the reports that lists no one. There is no name. If they don't do what they're supposed to do, like apologise, no one will know, and no one can speak about it. And I just can't see how that's acceptable and how that fits with the LGA's model code of conduct that we are supposed to be adhering to and adopting. I think that really needs to be considered because we are perpetrating a system here as a city that allows abusers to get away with legitimate complaints.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that on record. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. So, thank you everyone for speaking to your statements. I will allow my colleagues on the committee ask any comments or if anything, views, thoughts, comments.
Should we be making comments in relation to statements? I don't think that's
No, and I meant generally not in relation to that, because where I was going to go to next was, you did request Councillor Goodman that we do the legal aspects after. So do we immediately move on to
Sorry, Chair, just before you move a motion, I did want to ask, Agenda 7 and Agenda 8 items have a relationship. They are separate. I just wonder from a legal officer standpoint, is there any reason we must move the member officer protocol changes today, or should we move that with the other items, or does that cause a problem?
No, I think it's greatly improved, and we'll be more than happy to vote for it. I'm just sort of realising there was a relationship between the member code of conduct and the member officer protocol, and in an ideal situation, you could consider both together. At the moment, our plan was to just move agenda items 6 and 7 to the next meeting. I guess what I'm asking is, would it make sense to move agenda item 8, or are we happy to carry on with that today?
You can proceed in either way. They were packaged up, as you'll know, Councillor Kent for the Committee Model Working Group a couple of weeks ago, and they do naturally sit together, but they could be taken separately. It's one after.
Yeah. But there's no pressing.
There's no need. No, they'll both be on the same timeline to full council.
Can I suggest then, Chair, that we actually, not an ideal situation, but we actually move in agenda items 6, 7, 8, and all the public business we received, that we adjourn that to the next meeting, which I understand is in October anyway, because I actually think probably the committee discussing the member officer protocol with the member code of conduct, there is a relationship between the two documents, is on advantage.
If we do move the public business on, can we ensure that the questions that have already been submitted are prioritised? Because if people are putting questions, if we do get additional questions, then the questions that have already been submitted should be answered. Because officers would now have had a lot more time to be able to respond to those questions.
I think my colleague Nancy Wilson explained that we would seek to get answers out by the end of this week.
Yes.
Questions that have already been received.
Yeah.
I think that's
And can I just clarify? So those will be answered and published with this meeting minutes. Will they also be sent individually back to the people that ask the questions? So they will have an individual response as well?
Yeah.
And then we publish also for the next meeting.
yes.
Yes.
And also they will be able to submit written supplementary questions. The chair has said that they can do that.
Before the next meeting, yeah. In normal procedure with the normal timelines, but for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And will other people be able to ask new questions as well, not just supplementary questions, despite us deferring this item to another?
Okay, so I've just confirmed that will be the normal arrangement, so yes.
Yeah, so new questions, supplementary, new questions from either these people or other people, and supplementary questions from the
For
people
the next meeting.
submitted already in response to the written questions.
Thank you. So can we confirm we're happy to proceed on the basis of postponing agenda item 6, 7, 8? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Committee accepts. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I just chat about it? So, I think the next one I've got is penciled in on the 9th of October. Is that still penciled in? And at the moment it's for an hour, and then is an hour going to be sufficient for me to consider the likely volume of questions, the supplementary questions, and any new ones, as well as the 3 items that we're deferring from today?
Yeah.
We'll
We'll need to reconfirm, we'll need to reconfirm the things, but I think that's what's penciled in at the moment.
As far as I'm aware, there is business for that, other business for that meeting, so we'll be going ahead, and now we have 3 other items. So
there is additional.
There was other business scheduled for that meeting.
For the meeting, and this is added to the list, so we'll have to look at this.
So we'll have to look at the timescale for it, to allow sufficient time
Depending on the business, yeah.
to give full consideration to the questions and the answers and how they implicate the matters body committee has had.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate you making the trip down. Very useful conversations, everyone. There are no other items on the agenda, so we formally bring the meeting to an end. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for your time and efforts and leaving it to the head.
You've got a sack.